Hello. Welcome back to Brenda's Books. This is Season 4, Episode 6. And today I will be narrating for you a short story called Dad, Thad, and My Skateboard. Here we go. Dad, Thad, and My Skateboard. I stepped off my porch into the black night. I spread my arms wide and tilted my head back to look at the sky. The pouring rain shut my eyes, and I let myself get soaked. Everything from my face to my sweatshirt to my tennis shoes. Who cares if it took days to dry everything out? I want to remember what wet feels like. Somehow, this made the reality of moving to the desert tomorrow a little more bearable. Honestly, how could my parents do this to me? Just then, bright headlights came into view. I smiled in the darkness. I knew he would come. The car door slammed. A tall figure put on his hood and ran toward me. "Jace," I said. He pulled me in tight and kissed me. I could taste the rain on his lips. "I don't know how to do this. I'm going to miss you so much," I said against his cheek. "I'll miss you too," Jace said. "I'll come visit you. But you hate the heat." "You're worth it," he whispered as he brushed a hand over my wet hair. I buried my face in his shoulder, and he held me close until we were both shaking from the cold. I stared into the tiny mirror of the passenger side of my dad's truck. My brunette hair hung straight and long behind my shoulders. I checked one more time to make sure my brown eyes were no longer red from crying all night. I snapped the mirror shut and glanced out the dirty window to my right. Nevada had to be the ugliest state I had ever seen. There was nothing but brown flatness for mile after mile. "There's a lake where we're going, you know," my dad said. "That's what you keep saying, but I haven't seen water since we left Washington." "I know," my dad said, as he put his sun visor down to shade his eyes. "But we're going to live by Lake Mead. It's real nice there." "It would be nicer if Mom and Jace were coming," I said. I tried to sound snappy, but instead I choked up. Dad sighed but said nothing. "Why can't I just live with Jace? His mom won't care. Your mom would be happy to know we're going to keep Grandma company. And you might end up liking her too," Dad said, completely ignoring my comment. "Not likely," I mumbled, too low for Dad to hear. I stuck my elbow up on the armrest under the window. My life was over. Grandma's house was tiny. The front room was the size of my bedroom back home, but Grandma had still managed to furnish it with a floral couch, an overstuffed rocking chair, which matched the floral couch, a coffee table, and even an upright piano. Not to mention the questionable plant in the corner that was so tall it now grew on the ceiling. And the stuffy smell. I would definitely need to get used to that. Grandma was already asleep, so I went to bed too. Oddly enough, the room I would be staying in was much larger than the front room, but it was almost empty, besides the single bed and the small nightstand. I sent a goodnight text to Jace and went right to sleep. For the next few days, Grandma spent a lot of energy trying to talk to me about my interests, and I spent those days trying to avoid her as much as possible. It was pretty easy since all I had to do was stick my earbuds in and listen to music on my iPod. I kind of felt bad about that, but I just wanted privacy, and it was so boring here. While Grandma did her evening knitting ritual, I lay on the couch listening to R&B when my dad walked in the front door after working at the lake. He and Grandma did a lot of loud whispering. I knew they were talking about me, but I didn't really care. Then my dad walked over to me and yanked out one of my earbuds. "What?" I said, annoyed. "It's time for supper, and you're making it." "What?" I said again. "Come on, get off your duff. There's salad stuff in the fridge." "I can't make salad," I protested. "Not like Mom." "Nobody can, but you're still doing it." I groaned and got to my feet. "Fine." I found some lettuce, tomatoes, mushrooms, and bell peppers to slice and dice. Then I whipped together some olive oil and poppy seed to make Mom's favorite dressing. "This is very nice, Stacy," Grandma said, once we were all eating at her miniature table in the miniature kitchen. I stuffed my mouth with 2 cherry tomatoes. My dad gave me an evil look. "Thanks," I managed to say with my mouth full. Dad rolled his eyes. "You know, Stacy, there are a couple of nice boys around the block. Why don't I introduce you to them tomorrow?" said Grandma. "I already have a boyfriend." I said. Just at that moment, my phone buzzed with a text from Jace. I reached for it, but my dad snatched it out of my hands and put it on the kitchen counter behind him. "Well," said Dad, "you don't have time for those boys anyway, because tomorrow you've got a lot of work to do." "What?" "Yep. The lawn needs mowed, the laundry needs washed, and the bathrooms need cleaned." "And what do I get in return for all of this work?" I snapped. "Nothing," Dad said. "Just the satisfaction of not being lazy. It's a good feeling I'd like you to have." "Oh, goody," I said. "It's everything I've wanted and more. That's why I'm such a good dad," he said with a fake grin. I rolled my eyes. Grandma reached and stood for Dad's plate. "Let me take that for you," she said. "Oh, no. Stacy is doing the dishes tonight." My mouth fell open. "Seriously?" "Seriously," he said in a staunch tone as my grandma exited the kitchen. "And let me guess, I don't get an allowance this week." "When have I ever given you an allowance?" I leaned back in my chair. I knew it. I stood in haste, grabbing my plate in his. "But," he said, tugging my arm. I stopped to look at him. "If you do all this, and keep those things out of your ears, and make an effort to get to know your grandma," he paused, "I'll buy you a skateboard." My heart skipped a beat. "What? Seriously?" I squealed. My dad laughed. "Seriously." I can't say doing yard work and cleaning the house was fun, but at least I wasn't bored anymore. I hated the silence that came from the lack of a good beat in my ear, but I got used to it. My conversations with Grandma weren't riveting, but she was nice enough, and she didn't ask me personal questions. After 2 weeks of proving I could work hard and not be lazy, he kept his promise. I got that skateboard. It was covered with pink and black swirls. I couldn't have picked it out better myself. I spent all afternoon skating around the neighborhood, practicing all the tricks I had learned from Jace. When I returned to Grandma's driveway, I began practicing an ollie north. I was good at getting air, but landing right after sticking my front leg out, that was tough. I tried it over and over, but just couldn't quite get it. I started down the driveway one more time, but a group of girls turned the corner and passed by just at that moment, so I skid to the side to avoid hitting them. "Wow, that was amazing," one girl said with thick sarcasm. She had blonde curly hair and wore nothing but pink. "How long have you been practicing that?" I flipped my skateboard up with my foot and caught it with my right hand and gave the girl a nice glare. "The skaters belong on the other side of town, you know, where the other white trash is," she said. "Look who's talking," I snapped. "Girls," Grandma called from the front porch, "it's time for you to go home now." The girls smirked, but said nothing as they walked away. My heart pounded with fury. I could feel the heat rise through my neck. Grandma waved me in and I obeyed. I plopped myself on the couch and lay flat on my back, my heart still hammering. Grandma sat in her rocking chair next to me and picked up her knitting. "There were girls like that in my neighborhood too when I was growing up," she said. I resisted the urge to cover my ears. One called me a dewberry bunny from the garbage can. I turned my head to look at Grandma. What does that even mean? Grandma raised her eyebrows above her glasses. "Beats me." I sighed and lay my head back. "You know, just because I like to skateboard doesn't mean I do drugs too. Why does everyone assume that?" "Is that what you think they assume?" I shrugged. "Beats me." Grandma chuckled. I sat up abruptly. "You're not going to try to get me to be friends with that girl, are you?" "Why would I want you to be friends with that girl?" she said with a smirk. I lay back down and peered at the ceiling. "But you do need friends," Grandma said. "Why don't you go to the lake with your father tomorrow?" "I still don't believe there's a lake anywhere." Grandma laughed out loud at that. But then she got serious. "Why are you so mad at him?" "You seriously don't know?" I said, shifting my head to look at her. Grandma kept her eyes on her knitting. "No, beats me," she said with a smile. "Because he left Mom!" I cried. "No, Stacy." Grandma wagged a finger at me. "They chose to leave each other. And it's your dad who fought tooth and nail to get you to live with him for the summer." "I don't know why. It's not like I ever see him while he's working all the time." "Well, that's because you never take him up on his offer to go to work with him." "What am I supposed to do there?" I exclaimed. "Why don't you go and find out?" Grandma exclaimed in the same tone. That made me laugh. Just then the front door opened and in walked Dad. "George, you're just in time. Stacy has something to ask you." "Oh?" he said, hanging his sun hat on the hook by the door. Yeah. I was wondering if I could come to work with you tomorrow. Dad's eyes lit up. Well, sure, Stace. You'll love the lake. There's some real nice kids up there, too. Of course there is, I said dubiously. I slammed the heavy door of the pickup shut. Whoa, Dad. This place is huge. You didn't tell me it would be as crowded as Disneyland. What were you expecting? Dad asked. I shrugged. A quiet lake with you running a little drive-in booth or something? Dad laughed out loud as he hefted a large bag out of the back of the pickup. I took in the scene around me. A huge sign above me said, Harbor House Cafe and Lounge. Adjacent to that was a marina store, and adjacent to that was a building for boat and wave runner rentals. All kinds of people carrying all kinds of water skis and floating devices hurried in all directions. Every single one of them moved with excitement and anticipation. One little child ran around in circles, swinging her life jacket up and down until her father lifted her up on his shoulders. Ready, Squirt? Yay! The girl cried as she bounced up and down on his neck. I was surprised to see how many people knew my dad and said hello to him as he led me around the plethora of lines to the other side of the buildings. I stopped short. The gigantic lake was breathtaking, even with all the boats speeding across it. Pretty, isn't it? Said Dad. I just love the surrounding rock cliffs. Yeah, I said, still in awe. The slight wind turned the water over with small whitecaps. So you like it? Dad asked. I love it, I admitted. He smiled his crinkly smile at me and brought me in for an unexpected hug. I hugged him back. So where are these kids you told me about? I'm hoping they're actually my age and that you didn't sign me up for some babysitting job. My dad laughed as he looked every which way. I thought they would be here by now. I'd like to wait with you until they arrive, honey, but I've got a lot of work to get to. What do you do here, Dad? I asked. I'll give you details later. Stay off the loading ramps, okay? Which ones are those? The big ones, where they're loading, boats. I cocked my head in disapproval, but Dad just grinned. Then he leaned into me and pointed his finger. Look, see that walking path on the other side of the farthest ramp? I nodded. Not very many people use it. You can skateboard on that, but only if there's nobody walking. I know the drill, Dad. Good. Stay out of trouble. He kissed me on the forehead, then walked in the other direction. What do you think I'll do? I called after him. Dad half turned as he kept walking. Not telling. Don't want to give you any ideas. I rolled my eyes, but he just grinned again, then resumed his course. I watched him walk away for just a minute. What on earth does he do here? I shrugged and spun around. I flipped my skateboard up into my hands and jogged in and out of people across several loading ramps until I reached the walking path Dad had pointed out. This was perfect for the tricks I wanted to practice. Hey, nice ollie north! I flipped my hair around. A tall boy about my age stood behind me, grinning. He had slightly shaggy blonde surfer hair and was carrying a wakeboard. Thanks, I said with a small smile. Do you wakeboard too? Never tried, I said. Well, come on. We got plenty of room in the boat, right, guys? He turned to his group of friends that were standing behind him. They consisted of 2 other guys, both dark-haired and average build, and an auburn-haired girl. All 4 of them were as tan could be. The girl was wearing a racing swimsuit, and the boys wore long swim shorts with no shirt. I took a step back. Most kids in my school back home were not in as good of shape as these people, especially the blonde boy. So what do you say? Do you want to come with us? What? I paused as I gauged their expressions. All 3 boys smiled and seemed eager for me to join. The girl not as much, but I was used to that. There was something about the way that I looked that made all the girls hate me from the very beginning. That's okay. I didn't bring my swimsuit. Yeah, it looks like you're not really used to the sun, mocked the girl, looking over my very white skin. That doesn't matter, the blonde boy cut in. Chrissy's boarded in a tank top and shorts before. He gestured to my outfit. The girl shrugged and nodded. Well, maybe I'll just watch you guys, I said. All right. The boy put his hand out to give me a low 5. I slapped it back. What's your name? He asked. Stacy? Hey, Stacy, I'm Thad. And this is Bryce, Connor, and Kristen. My name's Chrissy, Thad. Thad cracked a smile. Right, that's what I meant. Hey, guys, I said, lifting my hand in a small wave. I followed the group down the path and onto a dock, where an old yellow and brown speedboat was tied up. I know the boat's not exactly pretty, said Thad, "but she's real reliable." "No, this is great," I countered. "Can I sit in the front?" Thad motioned with both hands for me to pass him to the bow of the boat. I sat at the top of the bow and grinned at the sight of the water's gorgeous green and blue. "You're smiling like you've never seen a lake before," said Chrissy. "What?" I shifted my gaze back to the girl. "She's just admiring nature," Thad cut in. "What's wrong with that?" Chrissy stared at Thad for a long moment, then glanced at me and back at him. She rolled her eyes, then moved to sit at the seat behind the driver. "Let's get going, Connor," Thad called. "On it." Connor turned on the ignition and slowly drove the boat away from the docks. And that concludes part 1 of Dad, Thad, and My Skateboard. Next Thursday, you will get to hear all about what happens on the lake. And so, I hope you join me then. Thanks for listening to Brenda's Books, and as always, have a wonderful week. Until next time, take care.